Absolutely nothing beats windshield time, a road trip, and good conversation in the car. Welcome to another episode of Dan the Road Trip Guy, where we have entertaining conversations about cars and road trips, life lessons, and maybe every now and then a little advice. I'm your host, Dan Neal, road trip extraordinaire, and now buckle up and enjoy the show. Last month, Linda and I were in Nashville, Tennessee for the Ed Sheeran concert. The Friday night before the concert, we wandered around downtown Nashville on Broadway to listen to some good music. If you've been to Nashville, you know what I mean. We strolled down Broadway and came across Blake Shelton's place, Old Red. Heard some great music coming out. The windows were open, the doors were open, so you could hear the music really well. So we wandered in there, and band was up called the Scotty Mac Band. Their music was outstanding. We just enjoyed our time there and listening to the band perform. My mind just went to, I need to have the lead singer on my show. I reached out to him, and he agreed to talk to me. Taking a virtual road trip today with Scott McLaughlin, and I'm excited to learn a little bit more about him. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, it's an honor to have you here. We've never met before, so this should be fun.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it, man.
Well, thank you. Take a couple minutes, just tell my listeners, who is Scott McLaughlin?
Well, Scott McLaughlin is a kid who grew up out in the desert in California, not too far from Palm Springs. Just kind of have always been into music since I was in middle school. I got my first guitar in, I think, 7th grade as for a birthday present, and have just kind of always been plinking around on it ever since. I've been in multiple bands, all different genres going up, and it wasn't until I was probably in my mid-20s that I finally realized that I needed to get an acoustic guitar and start playing songs that I could sing to people. They would actually want to sit and listen to me for more than a few minutes at a time. And that's kind of where it all picked up from there. I love country music. I love all music. I grew up in a very music-friendly family. My dad is kind of one of those people who can pick up anything and get a knack for it. You know, he played piano and guitar and saxophone. He's just really intuitive. He had played guitar a lot growing up. Always had a lot of the classics, classic rock, classic country on rotation in the car, road trips, vacations, and stuff like that. And I've just always been a lover of music. It just intrigues me. Yeah. And that, I mean, in a nutshell, that's kind of me. I'm a performing country singer-songwriter. I've got a wife and 3 kids at home and kind of a big balancing act, but you know, I love every minute of it.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, we'll get into some of that music and the ups and downs of it a little bit later. This is Dan, the road trip guy, so this podcast is a little bit about road trips and cars. But what was your first car?
Was a 1984 Mitsubishi pickup truck, single cab. It was turbocharged, and it was actually the hay truck. My dad had picked it up, and they were using it to run hay with for years from our house. We had horses and stuff. It was just kind of the errand run, you know, use a truck to run around town and do errands in. But when it came time for me to get a car, he slapped a paint job on it, and that was it. I loved it, man.
Yeah, what color was it?
It was blue.
Yeah.
Like a sparkle blue.
Yeah, so did you work around the farm then, growing up on a farm?
Yeah, so we had a ranch. I mean, we didn't grow up on a lot of property, but we had horses and raised cows and pigs for meat and chickens and all. And it was it was cool. I mean, I grew up out in the sticks, and it was a dairy town called Hemet. Not so much a dairy town anymore, but it was a dairy town growing up. Yeah, I mean, we had to do all the normal stuff, you know, feeding the animals and cleaning the fields and just all that stuff. It was cool. Yeah. It was a really, really good childhood.
What happened to that truck?
You know what? I sold it. I had it for 2 years, and I think it was my senior year. I had said, you know, Dad, I want to get something a little more current.
Sure.
So I stepped up and got a Ford Ranger.
Okay.
And so I sold it. Same thing, single cab, stick shift, great little truck. Slapped some big tires on it and felt pretty cool driving around town in it. And I drove that thing until the wheels fell off, and I've been driving Fords ever since.
Oh, Well, cool. Yeah, I probably should have hung on to that Ford Ranger. They're a little bit popular now as collectors.
They were, yeah, it was such a cool truck to have back then, man. When I grew up, everybody drove little single cab trucks like that, the Ford Rangers, the Chevy S10s, and then Toyota Tacomas. That's just pretty much, it was one of those three.
Yeah.
If you were driving a truck growing up in my town.
Do you have a road trip that just sticks out in your mind that's just kind of epic, we'll say? And
oh yeah, man, there's been a lot of them. Growing up as a kid, we drove a lot of places. So my dad was actually in the racing circuit with
okay.
NHRA and IHRA, Top Fuel Dragsters and Funny Cars. So we did a lot of the local stuff. I mean, local, I should say, to the West Coast, stuff that he could drive to. We were always driving up to Northern California or out to Arizona. We did a lot of river trips growing up, so we were always driving out there. And I used to love that stuff. My dad was real big, so he'd put on Fleetwood Mac or Dwight Yoakam or something like that. And it was just always about like driving and music and just open desert road. We never flew anywhere. I don't even think I got on my first plane till I was 18 or 19 years old.
Okay.
So it was always about driving places. With the band, we obviously drive a lot. I mean, there's been a lot of memorable ones. I think probably one of the most memorable was we had to do a last minute gig in Vegas. I mean, we literally got called the night before to go out to Vegas and open for a national touring country act. We had to be back in California early the next morning. So there was really no way we were gonna make to be able to get a hotel room and stay. And so we drove out, and then I flew my wife out to catch the show. And her and I just drove the rig back home overnight in order to make it. Got back to the house, had like 2 hours to nap, and had to get in the car and go off to our next show that we had already had on the books, which was a big festival the next day. And, and there's just been a lot of those. I mean, we drove with the band, we drove 20 hours to Grand Junction, Colorado.
Sure.
To play a festival with the Zach Brown Band. I mean, they asked us to play the after party, and so we went, and I mean, it was a 20-hour drive to get up there. So there's just been so many of those. Some of my best memories actually were when we got a van. We got like a 15-passenger cargo van.
Okay.
And I just remember thinking like, this is what I've always wanted. It's like I'm packed in this van. I got my best friends here, and we're just driving around playing shows. And again, being on the West Coast at the time, it was mostly driving through open desert roads. So it was just very reminiscent of what I did with my family growing up. So when you cut through eastern Utah over that pass into Colorado, it's just like, it's like the kind of desert mountain ranges where the peaks just go so high, and they're so red, and it's just so beautiful. And it just feels like you're driving through like a painting or a cartoon. Like, it doesn't feel like it can be real because it's so massive. So, I love that. And then me and my family, we road trip everywhere.
Okay.
My wife and I love to drive. My kids are all really good road trippers. We'll drive to see family. Her family's all out in Oklahoma. So we drive out there and drive all over Oklahoma. And that's just God's country out there. It's just beautiful. So, we take as many opportunities to drive to go do something as we can, because we just love being on the open road.
Well, me too. And that's, I often tell people, you just can't see our country if you fly over it. You've got to be on the pavement.
Well, yeah. And you get to do the fun stuff. And it's not always the most impressive thing, but it's fun. And you're driving through, and it's like, well, we need to stop in this area, and I've never been in this town. What's the best rated sandwich shop in this town? Because you're on the road with nothing else to do, so you're just looking this stuff up.
Exactly.
You research the best sandwiches or tacos or best burger you can get in town, and you get to go somewhere that you've never been before and try stuff that the regular people, that the locals eat every day. That's the kind of stuff I like. I'm really big on checking out new food places and stuff like that. So we're always looking up where did the diners, drive-ins, and dives guy go? Like, what's the top rated place on Yelp if they have it? And just kind of going and seeking out new adventures while we're out there.
You mentioned Oklahoma. I do a race event the first week of May every year, and we ended up in Oklahoma again this year. And there's this little, call it a Route 66 type motel there called the Budget Z. And across the street is the Hickory House, just to stay there and kind of go back in time.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what it's all about. You got to get out there and experience these things up close and in person. And that's really the only way to do it. Because there's just so much stuff out there and so much life. You obviously can't experience from a plane. I'm a window guy, and I love nothing more than looking out during takeoff and landing. I think I have this weird thing where it's the grand scheme of history and the evolution of the human race. Like that's a gift from God to be able to look down, because you're such a small percentage of the population in the history of mankind that's actually going to be able to see the earth like the way a bird would.
Yep.
And it's just a spectacular thing to take it all in and stare down on creation. And you look at those little towns and stuff, and even some of the big ones. And I can never help but wonder like what life is like down there. So getting the chance to pass through them and see that, it's like, oh man, this is cool.
We'll shift gears a little bit here on the show and head down the music route. As I said, you're my first, call it entertainer, performer, musician. I don't know what you'd call yourself. I was struggling with that a little bit today. I was like, wonder what I call him. But talk about your music a little bit. But
yeah, well, for starters, I'm just a guy playing guitar and loving life because I get the opportunity to do it. And I think that that's the mentality that you should always keep. Like, this is an interesting industry. It's a wonderful town, and it's got some of the best people in it. Like, a lot of the people that are really doing the hard work here, they're good old boys, and it's a good old boys club. And as long as you're a good hang and you're friendly, it's really easy to make friends. And that's not to say that there's not some egos, because that's just the name of the game of the business we're in. There's a lot of really wonderful people, and my philosophy and I've learned from a lot of them, is just to be kind, to everybody. And, I'm not going to go too far off the rails here, but we had a show not too long ago down at Old Red where we had met you, and standing in the lobby getting ready to go on, a young lady came up to us and was just standing there by herself and just wanted to chat. And we had had a bass player sitting in with us that is actually part of one of the larger acts in country music. He's a buddy of mine, and we needed help, so we filled in that day, and they weren't on tour that week. He came down to play a couple bar gigs with us, and it was just this interesting like scenario where this gal was kind of apologizing because she just wanted to make friends and didn't want to be intrusive. And it was funny, she had 2 beers in her hand, like 2 tall boys. And she felt the need to explain to us that she wasn't drunk, but she had just gotten off of a plane from Michigan and was waiting for the rest of her group to get in town, and was just trying to make friends. And, again, she was overly apologetic. And I just said, you don't have to apologize. And she said, well, I've bumped into a few people today who just haven't been all that friendly. Mm. And so my response to that was shame on them.
Sure.
Like, nobody's a rock star. I don't care if you are a rock star. You're not a rock star. We're all just people here that are lucky enough to stand on a stage of some size or another and play guitar and make money. And everybody needs to keep that in mind. And so my buddy that's actually in this major touring act, he told this funny story. He goes, my wife is a social worker. She's out there working a real job, doing hard work and making a difference every day. He goes, I'm just a guy who picks up an instrument and I make noise and it makes people feel things. Like, this isn't a real job. We're lucky to be able to do this. And so those are the kind of experiences that have crafted me and shaped me as to the way I try and present myself and I interact with people. I mean, and you may have heard me say it the night I was up there, but we are truly blessed to be up on a stage like that, playing music every weekend for the crowds that we get. I've worked my whole life for this. And so I never, especially after the COVID shutdowns and not being able to perform for about a year and a half by the time it all settled, I'll never take that for granted. And I'll never take those people for granted. And that includes, the drunk, obnoxious ones, because we get our fair share of those. It really is a privilege. So, to go back to your original question, performer is probably the more all-encompassing term, but I'm just another guy playing guitar, and I'm so happy for it.
Quite honestly, that's how you come across on stage. I mean, it was just, you just kind of felt like sitting in your living room, I guess, and watching you perform, and your interaction with the crowd was great. I don't know. I just enjoyed it. I have absolutely no musical talent. I have no rhythm, but I just love to listen to music. As you said, it just makes me feel better.
And I'm glad to hear that, because that is our goal. Our main goal is to get up there and just make people happy. We just want to make people have fun. We don't get wrapped up in drama or politics. That's not part of our platform. Anything we're doing up there, the sole purpose is to make people forget about things and just be happy and joyful for those couple hours. So I'm glad you said that.
What was that? When was that moment that you said, yeah, this is what I want to be? And you spoke to it a little bit, but elaborate just a little bit on that moment of, I want to be a performer.
I just always felt it. I remember very distinctly driving down the road in middle school with my family. We were going out to dinner or something. And I remember very, very clearly the night my dad said, because my birthday was coming up, and he says, I'm just surprised you haven't asked for a guitar or something at this point. You're kind of getting to that age. And I had never thought about it. And then within a week or two, I was at school, and one of my buddies had a guitar, and he knew somebody else who had drums. And he told they had talked to one of the other kids in our group to getting a bass. And he's like, man, you should get another guitar, and we'll start a little band. And we were like 13 years old, 12 maybe, something like that. I went home, and, it was just within a couple weeks of that thing my dad mentioned. I said, Dad, I've been thinking about it, and I really want to get a guitar. And I think within a week, he had come home and surprised me with one. And I still have it. I'm looking at it right now.
Oh, fun. Glad you hung on to that.
Yeah. I mean, I've gone through a lot of guitars, but that one isn't going anywhere. So I started writing songs, like, probably most of the first couple of years was me just banging around, making noise with my friends. But I started writing songs, freshman, sophomore year of high school. And for the most part, it was the kind of stuff that was popular with my friends. I was trying to write little rock stuff and little punk stuff, and because that's what all my buddies were into, and my dad was always telling me, like, look, you need to play and write stuff like this. You need to do this. You need, this is what's going to make you a more well-rounded musician. And my dad, like I said, he was a hell of a player and a hell of a music fan. I mean, the stuff we listened to, it was like, looking back on it, I'm still a fan of it. It was the best of the best. It was the Allman Brothers. It was Boston. It was Skinner. It was Fleetwood Mac. It was a lot of Eric Clapton. A lot of live records. My dad was a real big fan of live albums when they came out. So we played a lot of those, Fleetwood Mac live when they did their reunion deal in the mid-90s, Eric Clapton Unplugged. And I just remember those records being played until they burn out. I remember, just nonstop. And then, a lot of the country stuff that was popular or country crossover. So, Dwight Yoakam, when he broke out, that record, just my dad played that thing until it wouldn't work anymore. The Dixie Chicks, the crossover stuff, Sheryl Crow. It was just, I just grew up in a household that just loved music that way. So I was always doing stuff, but it really, like I said, it wasn't until I was about 25.
Okay.
Where I was like I was playing guitar. I didn't really sing. And I just realized, like, I didn't have really anything to offer anybody. If I didn't have a band, I couldn't do anything, because nobody just wants to sit and watch some guy noodle around on his guitar. So I got an acoustic and started learning to sing. And within a couple years, or a year or two, like, I had a band going that I'd go play bars with, or I'd go play by myself in the corner, wine bars and places, little lounges, and just do acoustic songs. And then I got taken to Stagecoach Festival, which is a big multi-day festival in California. Probably one of the bigger country music festivals nationwide now. And I remember very, very clearly Brad Paisley was the headliner. It was like a pretty big lineup, but Reba McEntire was on the bill and Brad Paisley was the headliner. And I was just amazed. I just amazed. And that's when I went home and I was like, there might be something, like, even in California, there might be something to try in country music.
Yeah.
And that's really when it kind of kicked over. We started the band.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. So, because I read on the website how it came to be, but the Scotty Mac Band, how did that come to be?
I wanted to give it a shot. I thought it would be fun, so I put out a Craigslist ad, because you could put out a Craigslist ad back then and expect normal responses from normal people.
Sure.
Before all the scammers got a hold of it. And I got hit up by my drummer, John, who's still my drummer and one of my dearest friends.
Okay.
I was single at the time, and the original conversation went something along the lines of, I love this music. I'm not sure if it's really going to work. And I have another project that I'm working on right now, but I would really like to put together a band, and we're not going to take it too seriously. Like, I just want to go out and drink a couple beers, play some good songs, meet chicks, because again, I was single at the time. And
okay.
And I wanted it to be fun and low pressure. And that's what it was. It wasn't long after that, within a year, we were on a plane to Nashville and we recorded 6 songs that I had written.
Okay.
Put out our first EP. And I'm jumping around, but I had done some groundwork and attended some festivals with other bands and made some contact in the interim. And when I started sending that EP out to those contacts, we started getting booking on major festival billings. So, we had cut this EP, put it out, and then the summer after that, within a couple months of it coming out, we were booked on a bunch of big festival billings, opening for acts like Jake Owen, Chris Young, and so on and so forth.
Okay. Yeah.
And it just kind of rolled from there. Like this thing that we didn't want to be very serious and we wanted it to be fun. It became serious real quick.
Favorite song you've written? I know they're like children, right? They're all your favorite, but is there a song that you've written that's kind of your favorite?
Yeah, they are, and I am super personal about that. I've got buddies who write songs for a living, and they're fine just giving them away, like selling them to other artists who want to cut them. And I have my favorites that the deal would have to be pretty major for me to part with a handful of them. I think one of my favorite ones is a song off of our second EP called "Starts with a Girl." I had written this melody and I loved it. And I had started the song a week before I was due in the studio. I went out and I just had the bare bones framework for this song. But the band came in and knocked it out of the park. And the producer said, look, I don't think that you're ready to sing this. I don't think you know enough about what you're trying to put down yet. But I think there's promise here. So what I'm going to tell you to do is come back in a month or so with the words done, and then we'll cut it. So we did all the other tracks, got everything done, and his studio flooded shortly after that.
Oh, wow.
And he was out of commission for like 7 months. So, by the time it all got back together and I got out there, we're probably closing in on a year since I had written the song. And I went out and tracked the vocal with him. It just was so much better than I've ever could have hoped it would have been. And so, that one, just because of the story behind it, was kind of like the little song that could. It just didn't feel like it was supposed to become a thing, and it held up the release of the record and everything else. But I'm still to this day just so proud of that song. So that's probably the first one that sticks out. But yeah, they've all got a special place because most of the music that I write comes from personal experiences or observations.
Best kind of music, I think, probably, right?
I would have to say so.
Yeah.
I would have to say that if you want a listener to be able to connect, you have to give them something that they can tap into.
Anything on your bucket list that you want to get done? You're still young, so I'm a little older than you. Anything on your bucket list that you want to get done?
Well, musically, there's a few things. I would tell you that playing on that main stage at Stagecoach would be one of them.
Okay.
Because that's kind of the thing that really sparked all this for me. So I think back to that a lot. And I grew up not far from there. So I mean, it would really be like kind of like my own little personal homecoming to be able to say like, hey, I'm right over the hill from where I grew up, and this is one of the biggest shows in the country. And, I remember standing in this crowd, however many years ago, looking up at the stage, got the idea that this needed to be my life. There's other things too. Like, I am just praying for the day that I get to play at the Grand Ole Opry. Okay. We've done their outside stage. That's probably the most significant one.
Sure.
Because that's going to mean becoming a part of history and a part of the fabric of this music that's so important to me. We've done a couple of shows outside. They have a really nice little plaza stage outside, and you set up and you play during the day, and the folks that are there for the tours and stuff. And you're on the front steps of it, and it's just such an honor. The day that I get to set foot on that stage, I'm not going to say that that'll be it for me, but if that is the only thing that I do, like, that'll be enough.
Yeah.
Because I'll have known that I've stepped into a circle of people that, again, are the fabric and the foundation of this music. I'll be a part of the history.
Well, we hope you get there soon.
Yeah, well, you just keep grinding, keep praying. I'm sure it'll happen all in due time.
If you could take a road trip today with anyone, living or deceased, who would it be? Where would you go? What would you drive? Maybe that Ford Ranger. I don't know. What would you talk about?
Oh, man. Well, I got to be honest with you. If I could take a road trip anywhere right now, it'd be in my own car with my wife.
Yeah, well, yes. That's a given, right?
That's a given. I mean, we are at our best when we're on road trips together, and some of our best adventures that we've had have been just the two of us in the car. But I think again, I would have to probably tap somebody from the genre who has been there and done everything, because and I would ask him about like what it was like coming up, like what did you struggle with, how did you overcome that? So let's just pick somebody real, like a big name, like Ronnie Dunn from Brooks and Dunn. That is a voice that I just aspire to sing like, because it's so distinct and so classic. And Brooks and Dunn have done just a phenomenal job of writing out what is at this point, they're going on 35 years, I think. They got together. They had their solo deals in the mid-'80s and then got together in the late 80s and then kind of kicked it off in the early 90s. And they were fairly late in their career when they got started. And they've just found a way to ride the ups and downs of what the changes in the musical landscape. And they've navigated it, and they've always found a way to come back stronger and more relevant. And that's what interests me, because this music is the landscape is dynamic. I can talk all day about what I do and don't like about it right now, but I think there's something to be said for the people that have made a long career path, and they found a way to still be a part of what's current, but still retain what it is that made them them.
Yeah.
And I don't want to use the word like sell out, because everybody's here to, at the end of the day, they want to make money and do this on a grander scale. And so, your choice to buy into whatever is popular is your choice, and I respect that. But there's just something to be said for the people that just put their foot down and go, no, this is who I am, and I'm gonna make what's going on work for me. So I'd be interested to hear that. And I've heard some interviews and watched some documentaries, about how he felt about things in his life and the trajectory of his career leading up to when he got the call and they got their first deal. So, that's what I'm interested in, because this is a hard line of work. It's fun. It's always fun, but it's so hard on the heart for a number of reasons that don't always pertain to just being told no. It's not even always that simple. So you've got to have quite the constitution to get up and do this day after day after day and not get discouraged sometimes. So those are the stories from these people that I like to hear. How did you, when you got knocked down, how did you pick yourself up? Those would be the questions, that I would ask.
Ask you one more is, you've got an 18-year-old standing in front of you who wants to be a performer. What's one piece of advice you give them?
I think the biggest thing, and this is fairly common advice that I get. But I think the first thing would be kind, because be kind and be genuine. It's really easy to get sucked into this. I don't want to say this town, but into this industry. And there just are not a lot of kind people out there.
Mm-hmm.
And kindness goes a long way, because at the end of the day, like I had mentioned this earlier, the people that are doing the real work, the people that are the sound people, the touring bands, not the artists, the bands, because there is a distinction there a lot of times, the studio people. There's a lot of people out there that don't get face time in this industry that are responsible for 95% of the work. And they're just good old boys and girls, and they're just out there. This is a job for them. It's 365 days a year, and nobody knows their name most of the time. The average fan would know. Like I've got a buddy who's played on more records than you can imagine. Average fan will never know his name, but they have no idea that he's responsible for the most part for the way that song sounds. I mean, these artists come in with an acoustic work tape, and then these musicians, they're the ones that breathe life into it. So, I've just learned from them, because it's long hours. It's long hours in the studio. It's long hours in a bus or a van. It's long hours waiting around when you get to these festivals or venues to get to go on stage and do your 45 minutes or an hour. In an industry where egos run rampant, it's important to keep that in check and just be nice to everybody. It doesn't matter who they are. And then secondly, know, and this is really important, they need to know who they want to be.
Okay.
And stand behind that. And again, totally respectable. You want to go out there and chase the latest trend or try and set the latest trend or whatever it is, that's cool. But just know who you are and know who you want to be, know the type of artist, the type of songs you want to put out, and stand behind it. Because the bottom line is you have two options when it boils down to it. You're either going to make it or you're not. That's it. Those are
Yeah.
That's it. There's no gray area.
Right.
If you're going for a record deal, you're going to either get it or you're not. So you might as well get it by doing something that you can stand behind, in my opinion. Something that you feel, because you got to feel good about it at the end of the day. If you're a true artist and this is truly your craft, you have to feel good when you lay your head down at the end of the day. And there's a lot of artists with major label deals that I've heard interviews with or had conversations with that have said, look, I've passed on songs that I knew were going to be number one singles, that I knew were going to make me a lot of money and get me a lot of airplay, but it wasn't who I wanted to be. That's not why I got into this. So, so those are the kind of people that I admire.
Okay.
Lastly, and this is the important one, this is a job. And a lot of people lose sight of that. It's long hours and hard work. It's not a party. It can be for a lot of people, but it's not a party. Like, if you want to do it right, you got to be able to devote your life to this. If you look, everybody's got a different setup, but let's just look at the show that you saw. I get down there at, we'll say 9 o'clock. We get on stage at 10, start within 20 to 30 minutes, and play till 2 a.m. And I don't stop. And I do that 2 or 3 nights in a row. So, by the time I get from Friday to Sunday, like this last weekend, I had sung 12 hours of the less than 48 hours that I was from start to finish. You have to be prepared. And same thing with my drummer and guitar player. Like, we go home and, man, we're sore.
Yeah, sure.
You're tired. You wake up and then you still have to wake up and be your normal human self the next day.
Sure.
And this goes for all of us. Like, my wife deserves me to be up and present. And, it's not that she doesn't do all the things and support me and, let me sleep in when I need it, but I still have to be up and be a husband and a father the next day. My drummer always likes to tell the story as like we would go out and play like this massive festival, and you're playing for 3,000 or 4,000 people, and it's just like this rush, and you just walk off stage and you feel like there's just no feeling. It's electric. And then you wake up the next day and go home, and then he always jokes like, yeah, and the first thing I do is it's like, well, I got to go out and clean up dog poop.
Yeah,
because we're still human beings, and so it can be glamorous, it's fun, but at the end of the day, like, there's an 8-hour van ride, sleeping on the bench seat of a van or sometimes on the floor, if you want a good nap. And, or in the case of before we lived in Nashville, we would fly out, play, sleep, play again, and go right from the gig at 2 a.m. to the Waffle House in the airport and be on the 5 a.m. flight home without going to sleep, so we could be home at a decent hour.
Right.
And I want to make it clear, I love every minute of it.
Sure.
That's just the life and the rush and the good parts of it, Jimmy, because it's the adventure. But it takes a toll on you. Well,
Scott, I appreciate you sharing today, and thank you for coming on a show that you don't have a clue who I am, but so enjoyed your music while we were in Nashville. Tell my listeners how to find you, your music.
Absolutely. So everything we have is under Scotty Mac Band. If you're a social media person, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever it is, Scotty Mac Band. All of our original music is available on every digital streaming service, no matter what it is you use. And the thing that I've said forever is buy it, steal it, stream it. I don't care. I put it out there for your enjoyment. So we have, a brand new record that we're looking to put out, hopefully right after the first of the year, when after winter time's over, when the town picks back up, that we're really excited about. And we actually have an app, and we put a lot of work into this, and it's pretty cool. It's on for iPhone or Android users. You can just go to the App Store and search Scotty Mac Band. But you can stream all of our music through it. We have all our merch stuff through it. It links to our website, and it's got this really cool feature where when we're booking a show in your area, it geolocates you, and it will send you a notification saying, hey, we're coming to your town. Or if you come to Nashville, it'll let you know that we're playing.
Oh, fun.
When it sees you in there. So really cool thing. We've had it going for a lot of years, and it's just a very cool way to stay in touch with people.
Hey, Scott, thank you so much. That was fun. That was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, man, it was a real privilege. Thank you for letting me yammer on.
Until we meet up again, you can find me on the internet at dantheroadtripguy.com. I hope you will follow this podcast so that you don't miss any upcoming episodes, and share it with your family and friends so that they can enjoy the stories of my guests also. Until we meet again on a future episode, keep having conversations with each other and keep driving.